Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life is wrestling.
Welcome, everyone, to Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with Cody Deaner. I am Cody Deaner, and I am a professional wrestler. I'm a professional wrestling producer with TNA Wrestling. I'm a professional motivational speaker, and I'm a professional dad. I'm a father of 4 awesome kids and a husband to 1 beautiful, amazing wife. And this is my podcast. This is a show where we explore how wrestling imitates life and life imitates wrestling, and all the lessons that we can learn in between. Before we get to today's episode, please visit our sponsors, Rest When Dead Clothing at restwhendead.ca and ceofit.ca for all your fitness and supplement needs. You can also support the show by taking a screenshot right now and tagging at Cody Deaner on your socials. So let's get to it. Enjoy the show. Work your gimmick. I am here with a professional wrestler, a author of a wicked awesome book that we're going to talk about in a minute, but I'm also here with my friend. I am here with Ben Nelson Creed, and we're going to be talking about work your gimmick. Ben, how's it going, brother?
Oh, it's going fantastic. Fantastic. We're getting into the springtime here. I don't know how it is in Ontario, but BC, it's like life comes up. I remember being in Ontario. There was when I was there was no spring. There was a thaw, and then it was 40 degrees. And it was like, man. Being out on the coast, it's just a different feel.
We're kind of experiencing that right now, man. It's still like it just snowed yesterday, and it sucks. It's not. Yeah, it's not good. And I just got a cold plunge gimmick, and once it started to get, it teased us for a bit. It kind of got warm for a little bit, and I just got like one of those new cold plunge deals, and I was like, oh, this is sweet. It's starting to get spring. It'll be good. I'll do the cold plunge. And it's been like winter every single day, and I'm freezing my ass off both in and out of this thing. So yeah, man, it's not good. I was out in BC recently. It was really good to see you. But yeah, man, let's just cut to the chase, man. We got to work. I want to work your gimmick right now, I'm gonna work a gimmick. Oh, look at this.
That's the real deal.
That's like an original.
It's an original, I believe, and it actually goes into working your gimmick too. Because
okay,
like so you can call me Ben, but everyone calls me Bomber. You call me Bomber because we're friends, right?
Yeah, I'm probably going to call you Bomber, and we can explain that in the show notes. But this is my buddy Ben, my buddy Bomber. And for our audio listeners that have no idea what he just showed us on video, it was WrestleMania 10 original T-shirt, the real deal. Okay, so work your gimmick. What's this mean to you?
So the reason I have a WrestleMania 10 gimmick T-shirt is because in high school I knew I wanted to be a pro wrestler.
Yeah,
and it ties into the name Bomber. I was called at wrestling school. They called me the Mad Bomber. It's like, well, what does that even mean? What does it have to do with a gimmick? Well, it was a poorly chosen gimmick, I think, but there was a reason for it. In high school, there were some guys that I was friends with from like elementary school, and they had formed a rap group called the Mad Bombers. Now, but bomb is like BOBAS, right? And they were like, this was well before John Cena. Okay, so we're talking 1995, 94-ish. Okay. And they were a bunch of like super white, super like super well, but like fairly well-to-do, not rap material guys at all.
Got it.
And they had tracksuit Tuesdays, and they wore tracksuits to school. And they called themselves the Mad Bombers. And then when I was at wrestling school with Showtime, Eric Young, and all those other guys, we always had 2 gimmicks. We had a heel gimmick and a babyface gimmick that we would practice on, and we would do matches every weekend. And so when I was doing that, I was like, well, they're like, what do you want to call yourself? I was like, well, I don't know. I always thought rap was so stupid. So I said, well, you can call me the Mad Bomber. And they're like, okay, so you're Bomber. So that was my gimmick, the Mad Bomber, as a heel gimmick. And it was so cheesy. Like I cut these bad raps, cut these bad promos. Well, and again, this is predating John Cena by about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And it was just like Vanilla Ice on steroids, kind of stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And when I went they had a concert though, these guys, the Mad Bombers, they actually had a concert at our high school. And there was another band there called, they were called Let's Put the X in Sex. They're like a punk rock band. And the
This
lead
is so
singer,
90s. I love it. It's like so
so,
90s. Okay.
and the lead singer was this guy who was good rugby buddies with. His name was Billy Horsfield. And he
Yeah.
had the shirt on. He had the WrestleMania 10 shirt. And in the middle of the concert, he's like, "Where's Ben Nelson?" And I'm like, "Hey." And he like threw me this shirt. And I hung on to it because it was a beauty. I was like,
oh, it is a beauty.
So anytime I do a wrestling interview, I want to wear this shirt.
Hell yeah.
Kind of, it takes you back to your roots. Like WrestleMania 10 was fantastic. And that was my first introduction, I think, to wrestling gimmicks, the Mad Bomber, right? Like that's where I got the idea of doing that.
And so you really started, that's cool that in wrestling school that early, it was like, okay, everybody's going to have a heel gimmick and then a babyface gimmick, and you're going to work the gimmick and learn to work that gimmick into your shtick. And you're the perfect person for me to have on this podcast, Wrestling is Life is Wrestling, because, and some of my listeners would have heard this, me kind of plug in this book in the past. You have this amazing book called 12 Pro Wrestling Rules for Life, where you take these rules, these things that you've learned in the world of wrestling as a professional wrestler for many years, and then you apply it to life and how you can succeed in life. I wrote the foreword to the book. I got to put myself over too.
Fantastic foreword.
Thank you. Foreword. And I say in the foreword how jealous I am of the book because it's such a freaking amazing idea. And I could easily do an episode on each of these rules and I could do a whole podcast just with you, dude. But when I asked you, hey, let's please come on and let's talk about an idea, the first one you said is work your gimmick. So why is that an important thing, both in wrestling, and then how does this idea of working your gimmick apply to succeeding in life in whatever avenue you might choose?
Nice. Well, it's funny. It's the first rule because it's the first rule. Like, it's the first thing you need to do when you're a wrestler. Like, if you look at a lot of the all-time greats, and even the greats that we kind of laugh at technically, guys like Goldberg, who was an amazing athlete, but technically you didn't, think much of him, or Hogan, who actually could go, but he never did. The first thing they did was they let you know who they were when they walked into that ring, right? Like Goldberg, black tights, bald head, not cooler looking than mine. No nonsense, tough guy, boots, kicking ass, and that's it, right? He barely would cut a promo. Oh no, you got to have mic skills. Yeah, Goldberg didn't. He worked his gimmick. That was what he was. Hogan, 100% mic skills, 100% persona, and his wrestling skills. I talk about it in the book, but he never wrestled really in North America unless he really had to. And he knew how to work, but he didn't because he was working 2 nights a week a lot of the time, right? But again, with him, the gimmick was what you got to see first. So when you're talking about pro wrestling, you're going to have on any given show 2 dozen guys. And how are you going to stand out? What are you going to do that's going to make you memorable and exciting for the fans? And how are they going to build a connection with you? And that very first step thing that you have to do is you have to build a gimmick. You have to work your gimmick, and you have to present your gimmick, because how you present yourself is how you are perceived. So without doing that in the business, you're not going to be perceived anyway. I think if you go back just maybe 8 years ago, the business was just full of, vanilla midgets, as they'd call us, right? Like small guys who could work really hard, great talent. And it's like, what's your gimmick? It was like, well, I'm just, tough guy Tommy or whatever, and I'm just a really good wrestler. Yeah. It's like, well, cool. But, you're competing with everybody in that in that field. And that is everybody. Yeah. That is everybody, Yeah. So I think the first thing that you have to think about when you're becoming a pro wrestler, or even as a wrestler, is what is the brand? What is my gimmick that I'm presenting, right? And people think of gimmick okay, well, you got gobbledygooker, you got the model Rick Martel, right? They're all gimmicks, but I'd like to think of it more in terms of not just what is your persona, but what is your brand? What if you flesh out what your sort of icon or logo is of who you are, what is behind that? And so when you start digging deeper and trying to delve into your gimmick and saying to yourself, what makes me me, or what do I want to be known for? Then you're building a gimmick and you're working a gimmick. And the thing that the reason I wanted to talk about this rule is because I think when you say work your gimmick, people think it should be something that's disingenuous, they think it should be like a false persona. And we've all seen that, like the Mad Bomber. I didn't even like rap. right? That was a false persona. Like, really, it was funny, but it was a stupid heel comedy gimmick. It wasn't going to go anywhere because I wasn't really living that. Like, I didn't even listen to, like, the 90s. What rap was I listening to? House of Pain, like, and I only knew one song, House of Pain. Like, I barely even listened to Naughty by Nature or any of those guys, right? I couldn't stand Snow. You know, who Ontario he's from Ontario, right?
I think so.
Oh, that song, it came on, I wanted to punch myself in the head. But
the other one that's like infamous.
Oh, don't even start.
Is that what it is? I can't even believe I even knew that. Oh,
yeah,
man.
Right? Stuck in your head. But I mean, but give him credit. What was his gimmick? He like rattled off these words. I didn't even know what it was that he was saying. You couldn't even keep track of it. It was so fast, but that was his gimmick, right?
Yeah, sure.
I kind of lost the thread there, but so
you were talking about how your idea of doing that cheesy heel gimmick was really inauthentic. I think that's really what you were essentially getting at. Yeah.
Yeah, and so people think like, okay, you were saying work a gimmick, like, okay, I got to go out there. I could be. I mean, I've seen some beauty gimmicks, right? I've seen great workers with terrible gimmicks, like King Daddy's Swing, or like, I mean, Repo Man, if you want to think about it, you know, or like there's, like Repo Man. It wasn't that, but it was pretty bad. I was like, well, what's he gonna do? He's gonna steal the belt, not give it back? Like, how does that work? And anytime you have a gimmick like that starts sort of breaking down the wall of these are the rules in wrestling, and you're going completely outside of them, so that the format of having a guy wrestle for a belt doesn't even work when you can just take the belt away because you're the Repo Man. It doesn't make any sense, right?
Yes.
But more to the fact, like, your gimmick isn't something that you make up. No, it isn't something that you pretend to be. It's something that you are, and you accentuate. You bring it out, right?
Yeah.
I think
what.
Go ahead.
I think this gets to something that I really want to ask you about this, because I think this is important, because as you're talking, the whole time you're talking, I'm like, yep, that applies to life. That applies to life. That applies to life. Like, we're talking about wrestling, but we're also talking about life. Like, when we say work your gimmick, we're talking about a life skill as well. So let's pull it back to the beginning, and because I get asked this both by young professional wrestlers, but then also young people that I talk to when I'm traveling and speaking, and I talk to students. From young wrestlers, I get, how do I find a gimmick in wrestling? And then when I talk to young people outside of the scope of wrestling, they're like, how did you know what you wanted to do with your life? And I think those questions are connected. Right? I think because if you're inauthentic with either of those, you're going to make the wrong decision. If you pick a gimmick just because you think it's going to be over and it's not you, you're going to go down a path of inauthenticity. You're not going to find something that's going to really connect. And then with young people, if they pick a job or a career because, like, oh, I want to make money, and my dad did that and he made good money, so I'm just going to go do that, even though they don't like it, when it doesn't actually connect to who they are, they're headed down a path where it's not going to work. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And I can agree with that from personal experience, but there's so much to unpackage there. As far as like your wrestling gimmick, and then we'll get into maybe like your life gimmick.
Okay.
For lack of a better. As far as your wrestling gimmick goes, I think The Rock said it pretty well. It should be you with the volume turned way up. Okay. And if you have something that's immediately identifiable, after you've brought that in, then you can start to play with people's expectations and you can broaden the character. But if you don't have a gimmick that you can summarize in about one sentence, you really need to pull it back and oversimplify it for the first wee bit, and then you get going. So when I got rid of the Mad Bomber, I came back as the Battling Bard or Supernatural Nelson Creed. And I was a Shakespearean actor turned wrestler. And it's like, okay, well, what does that even mean? I was like, well, he's there to perform. He wants to hog the stage. So it's like, I got a cape. I come out with a book. I wrote a book on Shakespeare. I yell huzzah. I hurl Shakespearean insults at the audience. But when I come through the curtain, Handel's Music for Royal Fireworks is playing. Okay. So it's like, okay, right away, you know, this isn't your typical thing. This is something referencing classic literature and classic art and high society or whatever. Yep. And then I come out and I've got that, and I yell huzzah, and I throw a streamer for myself, and I've got a Shakespearean shirt or a t-shirt that says shut up and read on it. And I've got, the Shakespeare masks on the trunk. So I got the quill on the crotch of it.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. But it's like, oh, okay. I get that. He's a dumb Shakespeare guy wrestling. Oh, okay. He's calling for encores. What? Who does that? Right? It's a simple gimmick. I love Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I always wanted to do that gimmick too, by the way. I didn't have the courage to do it until about 3 years in the business, but I always wanted to do it.
Mhm.
And that ties in later to like the part about paying your dues and working hard away from the spotlight, also in the book. But
Right.
so I think when you're a wrestler and you're trying to find your gimmick, you're trying to find your niche, you just say, well, what? Like there were guys in California who, what did they come out with? They came out with the Power Pad. And what were they called? Like, the Power Pad for Nintendo? It was like
Yeah.
that 4x4 thing and you could stomp on it.
Oh,
They had like
yeah.
power gloves and they're just, I can't remember what they're called, but they were like super nerds, basically,
Oh,
like super video
interesting.
game nerds. And they
Okay.
called
Yeah.
their finisher some video game, final boss or something like that, right?
Right.
Like, you can pick out what you find interesting. And we are lucky, I think, especially if you're a young wrestler now, you're lucky in that people almost always know now, oh, okay, he's going to have a gimmick. And then if you
Mm.
give them enough material or some clear material, they'll say, oh, that's his gimmick. I mean, like, and there's wrestlers like Carrie saying, like, she was a pirate, right? Right? Is that
I
what she
think
was?
so. I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
But her main gimmick was that crazy flying elbow drop. Like, your gimmick can come down to being almost one thing, you know?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
in the book, we talk about like McDonald's and clowns selling burgers. Why are they selling that? Well, it's for kids. That's why Ronald McDonald's not there anymore, right?
Yeah.
You got Groucho Marx. What was again? Well, he had the mustache, right? Like,
Yeah.
you get those glasses and the big nose and the mustache. That was a Groucho Marx thing. All these
Yeah.
people throughout history had gimmicks. Yul Brynner was a bald actor. That was it. That was it.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, these are probably all dated references, right? But I mean, Mr. Perfect. What's that? He's perfect. What? He's a super athlete. What? It's just, if you have something immediately identifiable, either with a brand or a name, it's going to hit the fans and you're going to feel like, hey, I've got an avenue to work with. And then all of a sudden, everything you do becomes directed towards that. Like when I'm in the ring and I'm a Shakespearean, I'm the battling bard and I give a guy a backbreaker, I just call for an encore. Why? Because it's stroking my ego, right?
Mm.
If I do something good, I yell huzzah, everything I do in that ring becomes based around your gimmick and your persona. And like you can do mental exercises where like, okay, if I was in Gimmick and I'm ordering food at a restaurant, what would that look like?
Right. Yeah.
I'm in Gimmick and I'm on a date. What would that look like? How does
Right.
my gimmick walk around the house? Like everything you do should, when you're a pro wrestler, be crafted towards your higher vision of, this is what I want to be known for, and this is what I want people to think when they see me.
Okay. So how does this apply to life?
Good question. So Robert Greene is a brilliant author. He's the one that wrote I think it's the 42 or it's probably more. I haven't read the book, but The Laws of Power.
Okay.
But I was
Yes, I've
listening to
heard
an
of it.
interview.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was listening to an interview with him, and he was actually quoting a book which I have read, which was How to Win Friends and Influence People. Okay.
Yes.
When you hear that title, you think, okay, well, how do you trick people? And that's what the title makes you think. But as you actually read it, the title reflects the idea of actually what you want to do is you don't want to fake it. You want to build a bond and genuinely listen to people. And when you're trying to influence someone, you have to make sure that you hear their concerns and hear what they're talking about. But the number one thing is to be genuine in that. So if you are building a gimmick and you want to be known for something, you have to be genuine in that. You can't just be trying to use people. You can't be trying to present a false persona of you. You have to just be you, and you have to accept other people for what they are too, and listen to what they're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're trying to identify your gimmick for life, and I don't even like for life, I don't even like using that, but I think what you want to identify is like, what do I actually want to be known for? Like if someone could strip all the nonsense away, and instead of trying to influence me and trick me, or me trying to influence them and trick them, if someone could just strip all that away and know what I'm actually about and what I actually want to be known for, what I want to be remembered for, that's your gimmick, right? So it might be you pull out, like Robert Greene pulled out the story of when he was a kid, he was obsessed with words and language and how things went back and forth. And he would do like anagrams and palindromies and word puzzles and all these kinds of things, even from a very young age, about 6 or 7. And as he got older, he started to realize, I think he was working in Hollywood. I think he was doing also in the media, and he was working in the press and all these different things. He said, I really don't like this side, even though I'm using my skills. He was using his gimmick of liking writing. He's like, this isn't really what I want to be known for, and it doesn't make me feel good. And I think people, especially nowadays, when we're told, no, it's all science, we tend not to trust ourselves. And I think if you really identify, you say, yeah, I could see that being something I feel good about. If you have that bigger vision of what you're building for your career or your life in place, then your own guts and instincts are going to tell you, yeah, this isn't your gimmick. This is like, we've all made mistakes. And when we've made a mistake, it's been like, yeah, that wasn't who I was. That was like a part of me that wanted to do that, but that wasn't actually what I want to be known for.
Yeah.
So if I don't know, like if you're,
that's such good advice, dude. It's so applicable. It's so true. Everything that you're saying. Like I think that's exactly true. And I think because I've had this experience with young wrestlers, right? Like if you ask them, they'll be like, was my match any good? I'm like, well, you have ears. You tell me.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, no, it wasn't very good. And like, well, why not? And then they start saying, well, this felt weird and this felt off. I'm like, yes, your instincts are all right. All those things were off. And it's the same thing with life. Like young people that like make a mistake. It's like, why did I do that? Well, you tell me, why did you do that? And like, well, I did that because of peer pressure. Okay. Did that feel right? No, I just felt like I should do it, but I didn't really want to. It's like, well, yes, your gut instincts are telling you that. And I think this idea of what do you want to be known for in life is a really good analogy because you're really narrowing your gimmick down. You said earlier about like, it can just be one thing or should be one simplified thing. I think it's like, it's also relates to vision, right? Like what are your goals? What is your vision for what you want to accomplish in life? Let's simplify it. Let's bring it down. And we'll use the word gimmick because it's connected to wrestling, but that's really what it's about is what do you want to be known for? What is your higher vision for yourself as a human being in this world? And what will your legacy be? Will your legacy be the guy that creeps around, and tries to steal the belt and you got tire marks on your gimmicks?
Yeah.
Or is your legacy the cool face paint with the spikes that you pull off and, oh man, no, that's Smash from Demolition.
Right.
Like which
iconic still.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the iconic one? I think most wrestling fans would say, well, I relate to Smash. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the legacy. And I think your life can be the same. I think you could decide which legacy you want to leave and which one is really going to like move people. And that's the one you should be striving for.
Exactly. And if I could just add, what do you want to be known for to yourself? So it's because it's got to be a little bit more. And that just came to me when we were having the conversation. Like, what do you actually want to know yourself for? I think back when I was younger and we, like counseling young people in church and all this kind of stuff. And like, they're like, oh, okay, well, what's the kind of person you want to date? It's like, that's the wrong question. That's the wrong question. And like, who do you want to attract is the wrong question. It's like, who do you want to be? If you are the right person, if you build yourself into something that you respect and love and like, all the right things are going to come your way. It's not going to necessarily be easy every single time, but all the right things are going to come your way 100% of the time. I mean, 100% in the long run.
Yes.
Right? Like you can't fake your way through it. What do you want to know yourself for? And I think I heard somewhere someone said you have to have basically three things in life. You have to have something to do, something to love, and something to hope for. To do is what you're doing now. To hope for is like, okay, I've accomplished something. What am I doing now? Right? What am I going to build now? So what is my gimmick now? Okay, hey, wait, I won the IC belt. What am I going to go on now? Hey, I'm the main event of my local show. What am I going to do now? What am I building now?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Hey, in life, I've got, I'm married, I got kids, I got a easy job. But what am I going to do now where it's like, hey, that was one of the things I did in life where I really felt good about it while I was doing it and when it was done. Because we often make mistakes of, hey, it's going to feel good in the moment. Let's do it. Right. But if you just say, okay, is it going to make me feel good tomorrow? Or is it going to be a lasting thing? Then you can tell. And some things are going to feel great in the moment, like wrestling matches, right? Like great in the moment. And then as soon as they're done, like, man, I am glad I had that match. That match, we all have those matches where like,
hell yeah.
I remember that match. I remember that match. I remember one I had with Jace Fury in Montreal in like 2001 or 2. Like,
sweet.
we driven out with a bunch of the guys like JT and all those guys.
Yeah.
Ruffy Silverstein almost killed us
Sweet.
on the way, right? But the match, it was like, okay, it's just a throwaway match. And it's like, Jason's like, hey, Bomber, I talked to the promoter. We're going to work each other. I'm like, okay, cool. And he's like, what do you want to do? And we just called it. I was like, I don't know, whatever. We called some good stuff. And like, it was just a rip-roaring match where we just went out there and had it. And we didn't really realize until we're done. I was like, man, that was a really good match. That was fantastic. It was like everyone was into it, and they didn't even know us. What the heck do we do? So you can feel great in the moment when you're doing something that aligns with your higher vision and your values of where you're going in life. And I think that's what a gimmick really comes down to, both in life and wrestling. It's like, hey, I want to know myself for this. This is going to make me feel better about myself, and this is going to attract the right things in my life. And this is just something I like anyways, right?
Yeah.
We overthink it. Like,
yeah,
I wish I'd done, I wish I'd gone harder with wrestling, especially when I was about like 22, 23. Like, I was going to school as well. I'm like, I should have just taken a year off and just full on gone down and trained with Les Thatcher or OVW or something. Like, just gone full balls to the wall, because that was all I really wanted to do. Right.
Yeah.
And you have to, accept like, hey, what I want to do now, it's part of my vision for myself. Long term, I'm still going to feel like, yes, this was a good thing to do. I'm going to go for it.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good spot to end. And for this episode, we're going to do another one. But I love the fact that, you've written this book, and no matter what, maybe regrets in terms of full bore or what I wanted to do with wrestling, like, you have been able to give back to both wrestlers and then people with this book, 12 Pro Wrestling Rules for Life. I think this is a pretty cool legacy to leave behind, some pretty cool lessons. And I think somebody that has listened to this or has watched this today has really got something from everything that you've said. And now they want to read this book. They want to read it because, like, man, because that's only rule number one. Work your gimmicks, rule number one. And there's 12 of these things, and it's pretty sweet. So if people want to get this book, Bomber, how do they do that?
Best way is through Amazon. Just go to Amazon.ca. Yep, it's on there. You just type in Ben Nelson Creed. There's a couple other books there too, but just like Nelson Creed wrestling book, and it'll come up. You'll see it. I will
put that link in the show notes for people that want to read 12 Pro Wrestling Rules for Life. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Bomber. Whether you're working the gimmick in the ring or working your gimmick in life, it's a good rule to live by. Work your gimmick.
Yeah, absolutely. Cheers, bro.
Cheers, man.
Thanks.
That's going to do it for another episode of Wrestling is Life is Wrestling. Until next time, guys, please visit our sponsors, Rest When Dead Clothing at restwhendead.ca, as well as ceofit.ca for all your fitness and fitness supplement needs. Don't forget to take a screenshot of today's episode and tag me at Cody Deaner. If you want to learn how to book me on your wrestling show or your speaking event, you can go to codydeaner.com or learn about my speaking career at chrisgrayspeaks.com. Until next time, guys, don't forget that wrestling is life, is wrestling. We'll see you next time, guys.
Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life, is wrestling.